I think those. Oh, thanks. So it looks like Bob, Julie, and myself are the only committee members. Hopefully, Julia Gomez will be joining us shortly. I haven't heard otherwise from her.
We're also missing Ramdot.
Yeah. Okay. I know we do have a lot of things to cover today. Let me just give folks one more minute until we have 7:05 and then we'll get started.
That's nice. Yeah, I look through this thing.
Well, I have Zoom on my iPad, but
On your computer.
now because I have waiting time for Google. Conflicts. Look at.
Yeah, baby vision over here. This is gonna be the, the most entertaining part of our night.
That's because I'm somebody who taught at Bang Street and I'm into the little kids. Sweet. Look at her.
Okay, so I see that we're recording already, so let's just get started. Good evening, everyone. I'm Margaret Della. It is March 3rd, and this is our monthly special committee on racial equity. We're really glad to have all of you here tonight. Great, I have Ramdot, who's joining us, who's a committee member, Bob Bender, and Julie Reyes, who is also a member of this special committee. We welcome everyone. Thank you so much to Rosemary and to David and Sylvia, who are also community board members. So thank you all for being here tonight. I think, you know, especially, wait, I'm the host now, especially with what is going on in our world. I know many of us are deeply moved and upset and concerned about what's going on in Ukraine, the aggression by Russia's President Putin. You know, it's really set off a humanitarian crisis. There's been 1 million refugees in 7 days, and that's not even indicative of what else will transpire over the next several days, not only in Ukraine, but surrounding countries, especially those fleeing Russia. So I think the biggest concern, not only for the humanitarian crisis, but is the language used by Putin that has been anti-Semitic. It's also raised alarm bells for all of us who are concerned about populations, including Jews in Ukraine and throughout the world. There have been anti-Black movements in all of this turmoil where folks have been turned away at the border. I understand Ukraine has been addressing that, and they've been working with other surrounding countries to be sure that that's not happening or has stopped happening. We're also certainly concerned about LGBTQ communities in any country in turmoil, and all of the populations that we care so deeply about that are not only in harm's way globally, but sometimes can be in harm's way in our own city. I just wanted to take a reflection and pause there, and if anyone else would like to say anything.
I think we stand in solidarity with Ukraine as a granddaughter of a school teacher who was from I feel deeply affected by it, and I thank you for the voicing the anti-Black racism, the racism that's going on there at the border and how it had to address it. And the LGBTQ seems to be one of the pieces that Putin has problems with. He thinks that Western influence is bringing in this in quotes defect into his country and into Ukraine.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to say something?
Just very briefly, I was informed about a protest outside of the Russian mission. I thank Bob Bender for sending that the notice. The Hebrew Institute and a number of our Jewish community synagogues participated in this. And I was struck standing outside of that Russian mission. And I looked up at the sign, 255th Street, and below it is a second name, and it's Nathan Sharansky. It's the second name for 255th Street on Mashalou Avenue. And I will confess, I forgot the bravery and the history of Nathan Sharansky, and I went home and looked it up. And one of the first things I came across is he was born in Ukraine. He was Ukrainian. And I just found it to be one of those moments in history where, that we as a community stood up for Nathan Sharansky, and he was a Ukrainian, and the street is named after him. And those of us stood there on Sunday on behalf of the Ukrainian country. And there was the name of Nathan Sharansky. I don't want to make too much of it, but I want to tell you, it really touched me. So sorry, I bring that up for whatever it is worth. But again, Bob, thank you very much for sharing the information. And I hope there are more demonstrations. So thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. And I would also say, us being here tonight and being a part of the community board and being active in our community is also a testament to that democracy is a movement, is an act. So I think, this aggression by Russia in Ukraine is also a movement against democracy. So to all of folks here tonight and those who are active in our own corners of the world, I think we just have to be steadfast and be vocal and keep showing up. So thank you all. I also did want to mention that we had been reflecting on, certainly what does this mean for us? What are, what is this emphasis on, anti-Semitic language, anti-Black language? We've seen several examples. It's been, in the last year, at least New York City has had an increase by 100% in hate crimes. I think we've seen some vandalism of local temples. We've seen graffiti that is anti-Black and anti-Semitic in our playgrounds, frequently over playgrounds, over elected officials, windows and materials, and showing up at elected offices in which people are comparing, public health measures to, sort of a fascist society, or to, sort of the inhumaneness of the Holocaust, and all sorts of propaganda and language like that. So it is very concerning for what it is that we're doing in our community, and certainly however people can take impact and take action in supporting Ukraine. But what can we be doing in our own community where we're seeing some parallels between, the language that's used across the Atlantic, well, certainly across the globe, but in what ways are we going to be taking action here? And what thoughts do we have on mitigating violence in our own community that is deeply connected to hate? And I do see the Councilmember Dinowitz is here tonight, and so if you'd like to say anything, we welcome that as well. I'll just pause there for a moment, Councilmember.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're all having a nice evening. I just joined. I know you're talking about, I heard Margaret talking about Ukraine. I'll tell you in the council, in the next stated meeting, and this is all happening very quickly because the situation is unfolding quickly, where I'm co-sponsoring 2 resolutions in the city council. One is condemning the actions of Russia, the Russian government rather, and the other is in support of the Ukrainian people. And some of the language that I'm looking to include is condemning Putin's justification by talking about Nazification of Ukraine. So in the city council, we're trying to take steps to make our position known, speak out in solidarity with them, in condemning Russia as well, the Russian government rather. Many people attended the rally outside the Russian mission on Sunday. Since that time, a booth, it looks like a security booth, popped up outside the Russian mission. I looked into it. That is an NYPD booth. So if you go by there, I don't think it's labeled as such, but you should all, I asked them to label it. You should all know that that is an NYPD booth. There's nothing to worry about in terms of Russian government setting anything up, which is some of the concerns that were presented to me. So we have problems abroad. Obviously, it's having a deep impact on us at home. For those of us who are very empathetic, but of course for our Ukrainian neighbors who are really feeling this. I don't know if this came up, but I'm sure all of you have heard by now, where there's been racist and anti-Semitic graffiti over the past. Yeah, over the past few weeks. Our community is not new to hateful acts like this. It was less than a year ago when someone was smashing the windows at different synagogues. So we had a press conference with the borough president, with Assemblymember Dinowitz, with other community leaders about those incidents. So one, to stand up and say this is unacceptable in our community, but it's not enough to say something. We have to do something. So I'm convening a group of different leaders throughout the community. That's this coming Monday. Different lay and religious leaders and school leaders, because my view, and I think the overwhelming view of a lot of the people who take this seriously in the community, is, look, the hate crimes unit at the NYPD is investigating these particular incidents, but we have to do better for our kids to make sure they understand the impact of these words, to understand how to work together. And what we're looking to do is create these long-term solutions, right? Not just, this isn't a photo op such as meet and talk about how bad racism and anti-Semitism is. The goal is to really develop something that can actually work, and to bring as many people to the table as possible. I'm also a member of the budget negotiation team. So as a member of that team, I am going to be advocating for an increase in funding for the hate crimes initiatives in our city, particularly since hate crimes are on the rise. We see this all over. We see it most notably in violent acts, especially against the Asian American community. That's, I think, the most pronounced. But what we don't see as much are what I call them violent. They're not physically violent, but when you draw a swastika or draw the N-word or the F-word, words we don't even want to say, symbols we don't want to recopy. To me, that's violence. So I'm going to be advocating for more funding for that, as well as proposing legislation that helps ensure that we're all informed about not just violent acts of hate, not just physically violent acts of hate, but non-physical violent acts of hate. our goal is to create a community-driven solutions to address acts of hate, to build bridges and understand between communities. So I am looking to do that both through the budget, through legislation, and through local working groups and education.
Council member, has there also been legislation or a movement at the council to emphasize hate and violence taken against the Asian American population, Asian and Pacific
Yeah,
American
yes.
population? Mhm.
Yes. I think it was the mayor. I don't know if it was this mayor or the previous mayor set up a specific task force for Asian hate crimes. And I want to make something clear that it's always difficult to talk about this because if you don't mention a group, I think people assume it's to the exclusion of that group. I specifically mentioned race and Judaism and Jewish religion because that's what our community experienced recently. But nothing is to the exclusion of every group. I think it's important to recognize that hate is bad. Hate for who you are, how you were born, what you believe is bad all over. And there's certain things that unify those messages. But each group, as you noted with the Asian American community, they're facing, I think, the steepest rise in hate crimes. The Jewish community, I think, we face the plurality of hate crimes, certainly the most in my council district. And these, and the hate crimes initiative budget, at least, the funding is for ideally culturally responsive education and culturally sensitive responses to any incidents, and again, to that bridge building. And regarding the Asian American community, I am in early talks with some of my Asian colleagues to sort of build those bridges between the Jewish community, which I chair the Jewish caucus, and the Asian community, and see what kinds of relationships can be built there. And that is not to the exclusion of the Black community, of the LGBTQ community, of the Muslim community, right? These are all inclusive, but also recognizing that sometimes the uniqueness of different cultures and backgrounds and everything like that.
Thank you.
I would
I also
like to
wanted to
just-
mention
I
that.
want to make,
Sorry, Jackie, just one quick thing. I also just wanted to share that, action is being taken, in addition to what the council member is saying, is that there's also the NYPD hate crimes dashboard where you can go and see the frequency of assaults or criminal behavior against different individuals. And so this information gives certainly sort of how hate crimes have been reported, or sort of the intent behind it. And it also gives incidents by police precincts that you can review here. Certainly it's concerning to us that we have this dark blue section here in the northwest Bronx where we reside. So certainly, this is a good resource for people to see what are some of the top concerns for our communities.
Yeah, you'll notice on that site, and I'm familiar with that site because about a month ago I held a roundtable on anti-Semitism. And by the way, anyone here who's on my email list would have received these resources, but we had the roundtable and subsequently sent out a list of resources, including that one. One of the things you'll notice on that website is that it tells you where the crime happened, the nature of the crime, and if an arrest was made. But what it doesn't tell you is after an arrest is made, what the result of that arrest was. Was someone, was there a guilty plea? Is someone getting counseling, or is that person in jail? There's no follow-up to that. And so that was also one of the things I'm looking into to include in that dashboard and to make as public as is legally possible.
Thank you. Okay, Jackie, the wonderful Jackie Fisher, do you have something for the council member or you have a new topic?
No, I'm circling back to Ukraine.
Okay, great.
And the only comment I have on our local incidents is I'm very surprised there's no cameras like in a playground or something. I'm assuming there aren't, since we have no way of identifying who may have done what, but I would think with small kids being a playground.
Is that a capital request that you have, Jackie?
Pardon?
Is that a capital request that you have?
I don't know, but
Okay.
I think
Yes.
with kids around and yeah.
Yeah.
Capital
Anyway,
requests are due soon.
All right, Jackie, we'll put it on the list. Thank you. For
oh,
that.
Eric knows I have my list.
Oh,
Yeah.
I believe it.
Anyway, I would feel remiss in not mentioning this, although it's very disappointing. But especially in this particular community, this particular committee, what it stands for. What with Ukraine, I don't know how many people are aware, but it's been in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Time Magazine. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, the racist activity raised its head, where several, when crossing or attempting to cross the border, there were several African and other students, many African and other countries, Northern and Sub-Saharan Africa, they go to school. They're students in Ukraine, mainly medical and engineering. And unfortunately, by the Ukrainian border patrol, they were prevented and blocked from crossing into Poland in particular, and then other countries. I know the Jamaican government, the president, and some of the embassies, one in Poland in particular, they intervened and immediately provided transportation within to the border, and then safety passage into the next country, and safety and transportation back home. But it just goes to show that even within Ukraine, with what they're going through right now, in spite of that, the ugly head of racism did raise its head. So I think it's worth noting that it's it's all over the planet, like.
Thank you,
It's
Jackie.
Was anyone aware, or I can't be the only one?
Yes.
Yes,
We're
No.
aware.
I think we saw it on TV.
Mhm.
yes, it's been on.
No,
the
I'm
news.
not saying that. I'm just saying of people here. I'm not saying anything new.
Mhm. No, and I have been just following, out of concern, and seems as though the Ukraine government has set up a hotline, and from press reports at the border, allegedly, because of what you're saying, Jamaican governments, other governments jumping in to say like, hey,
Yeah,
we
well,
gotta protect our students, or just any student who looks like.
yeah, there was one doctor he had held, and it's freezing there now. I don't know if any of you have spent time in Eastern Europe, but I have throughout the 80s and 90s, and it's, I mean, we know winter, but we don't know winter. So,
Yeah, well, keep us informed. I mean, it's definitely something.
yeah, well,
that's-
I think
We're
it's
very
past.
concerned about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. Any other comments? Steph, excuse me, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to, this may have been sent around in the council members newsletter. So also, hi, everyone. There's actually a grant that's available by the Office to Prevent Hate Crimes, or Hate Crime Prevention Office. And it's up to $20,000. It's for community-based organizations to do innovative projects around hate crime. So Margaret, I can send you that link. I see the chat is disabled. But there, if you go to, I think it's nyc.gov/stop hate, there are a lot of good resources that are available. There's also an interagency city government group that I know works really well together, collaborating to figure out different strategies and engage communities in um, violence prevention and also supporting communities that are victims of crime. So it's just like a good resource to be aware of.
Thank you for that. Okay, any other comments before we move on?
Excuse me, may I ask about the grant? When is this grant available, or when is the deadline for applying for it? And is this a possibility for us to do some community work here around the Undoing Racism? I'm not familiar with how, what the grant is actually, what the deadline is.
Yeah, it looks like the deadline to apply or to submit a proposal is through June 1st, but the project needs to be completed by June 30th. And I don't know the specifics on the payment process, but I imagine because it's a city project, you probably have to front the cost and be reimbursed. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not necessarily a grant that you would get money up front to do projects on. So, and in terms of the eligibility, it seems like community groups, I don't know legally how community boards work with applying for city resources like this. So, but I can send the link to Margaret and perhaps we share it around.
Yeah, that's great. I think
Margaret,
this is,
I apologize for interrupting, but our speaker is in the waiting room. And I hope you're the host.
I am.
Okay.
So you mentioned Speaker Bob. Did you want to introduce? How did you want to proceed, Bob Bender?
So if you're ready now, yes. We have with us tonight Bob Kaplan, Rabbi Bob Kaplan, who is a community board member and who has done a lot of work in terms of interfaith and interracial issues. And we asked him to speak tonight, particularly because of the recent outburst of racist language that we've been discussing tonight that we have seen in our playgrounds over the last few weeks. And so, Bob, I'm glad you could join us tonight. I know you have another appointment after this, so we won't hold you up, but we would be very grateful to hear from you about, situations like this. They're always troubling, of course, and it's always a question of how best to respond to them. The fact that we've had 3 different incidents, they've all taken place in playgrounds, seems to suggest that, they're probably young people who may be doing this. We don't know that, but, that's one possibility. And, we'd love some guidance from you because you've been in this situation before about, how we might respond, how we might educate the community, particularly the younger people in the community. But that's enough of an introduction. So go right ahead.
So thank you very much. I'm really honored to be amongst you tonight. I want to say greetings to the council member, as well as a number of friends who are on tonight. Just let me give you a little bit of the background of what I do and why I'm involved in this issue. I'm the executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, and particularly their Center for Community Leadership, which is the what we call shared society or interfaith, intergroup, community building division of that agency. And I've been there for quite a few years. Matter of fact, I started there shortly after the Crown Heights riots of 1991 and have been working communities throughout New York to meet the challenge of hate in a very express way. And I'm also one of the commissioners of the New York City Commission on Human Rights, and took that position just a few months ago. And in that role, of course, are concerned about the issue of hate as well from a very different angle. In addition, keep myself busy. My agency is one of the what's called PATH partners, Partners Against the Hate. There are 6 anchor agencies in New York City, and they work with the mayor's office on hate crimes prevention. And we have been given a certain amount of money that we gave out in grants. I know the Riverdale Y is one of the recipients of one of these grants to be able to do anti-hate work in the context of Riverdale. And this is something that we are really, again, honored to be a part of. So Bob and everyone else, you're probably right. These are young people, because the reality is that the vast majority of hate crimes or hate acts, and there's a real difference, and I'm just going to unpack that a little bit in a second, but the vast majority of these types of incidents are committed by people between the age of 12 and 22. That's sort of the national or particularly the local average. It's usually young people. It's not always. We know that because a number of the incidents that happen around anti-Semitism allegedly happened by people over that age. But it's generally these kinds of acts of scrawlings and taggings and either anti-Black, anti-gay, anti-Semitic scrawlings, graffiti is usually young folks that are doing these kinds of things. Again, this is a generalization and not always true. However, one of the things that you need to keep in mind that there is a real a difference, and someone might say, is this a hate crime? Well, there are very specific rules and regulations and criteria that meet for hate crimes. And I would really suggest that one goes on either the NYPD site or other sites to get the exact criteria around hate crimes. But basically what it means is that a crime is committed primarily with hate against another designated population, such as a faith group, such as a person's sexual orientation, such as a person's country of national origin, racial group, age group. There are several different other criteria that go into what would be classified as a hate crime. And a hate crime also indicates that if one is convicted of it is designated as a hate crime, and that's done generally initially by the NYPD in cooperation and connection to the local DA's office. Those crimes, once the person is convicted, would get an increased sentence for the type of crime that was committed. Whether what happened, the recent taggings that happened in the community will rise to the level of a hate crime. Well, first you have to catch the folks that did it. And then it has to be designated whether this rises to the level of hate crime. And again, that is something that is in the hands of both the NYPD and the local DA's office. However, doesn't mean that it's less tragic, doesn't mean that it's less traumatic. It doesn't mean that it's less disturbing to the context of society, that if these kinds of things happen in your community and you are either the target or sensitive to these kinds of issues, the way it disrupts life and disrupts our moral courage in the context of the community. So some of the things that we have done in the past are exactly what I hope will happen in this community as well, is education. Many of the times we have found that when these young people are in fact caught, they really did not have a concept of what they were doing. Sometimes the use of particularly the swastika, not knowing what the connotation is, not knowing the historical connotation or the impact that it's having on people. So educating them as to the horror and destructiveness of these kinds of graffiti or this kind of scrawling, so these kinds of acts is extremely important. So in many different communities, we have worked with different organizations across the city to do various different kinds of educational processes. Like for instance, in Crown Heights, we have worked with teams of representing both the African Caribbean American community and the Hasidic community, the Lubavitch community, to go into some of the local schools, both the public schools and the private schools, both the schools and the schools that are specifically Jewish in those community, to talk to the young people, to dispel some of the myths and some of the misgivings that they have about those communities, or give them the opportunity to talk through the kinds of feelings that are motivating these kinds of acts. Unfortunately, we're living in a society right now where some of our leadership, and I use that word loosely, because they may be designated by some as leadership, but when the leadership use these kinds of racial and other kinds of epithets to single out certain groups in the context of society, is absolutely unforgivable. And when these kinds of leaders utilize it on a regular basis, it almost seems okay. It almost seems like it's acceptable in the context of society. It is therefore your responsibility, not just the elected officials, not just the political leadership, not just the educators, not just the faith-based or the community-based or organizations, but everyone's responsibility to simply make a unified statement loudly in a community that these kinds of acts are simply unacceptable in the context of our society and the context of what we call our American dream. The statement that we've made is that the nightmare of hate has no place in the American dream. Now, that means that there are real curricula around. I know that the new chancellor that has come in, David Banks, I was on the mayoral transition team around the DOE, is really dedicated towards reinvigorating anti-hate curricular in the context of the schools. That will take some time. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to develop the proper kind of curriculum that is really focused in on what's happening today in 2022. I mean, just over this weekend. And here's another big issue. Many of these acts, we know, not young people, but many of these acts of older folks are committed by those with mental illness. I know that there, over this weekend alone, 7 women in the Asian community were attacked. I believe it was on Sunday. All traveling from Midtown to Lower Manhattan, women between, I believe, the ages of 17 to in their late 50s, just because they were Asian, on the streets being attacked and being hit and punched in the face by one individual. And thank God that individual was arrested. That individual is now incarcerated and being held. What will be the eventual upshot of what happens to him will be, of course, what the courts will decide. However, one could only imagine that there is mental health issues involved in this. And we know that in many of these cases, particularly the more violent ones, that there are real mental health issues involved in these things. So hate is not an insular thing from all the other things that are happening in society, all the other injustices in society, all the other issues that such as non-attention to mental health issues, non-attention to other kinds of criminal acts that are happening within our society, all contribute to it. So it is a very complex issue that need to be met in a complex way. And it is a long-term fix for a long-term problem. It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going away overnight. I always say that, and I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not going to be Pollyannish about it. I'm not going to say we're going to get rid of hate. It's just going to disappear from our society. I just don't think that's going to happen. It's been around for millennia. However, for many of the past, certainly over the past number of years, hate has been unacceptable in our society. And again, as I mentioned before, some quote unquote leaders have made it acceptable again. And it's our job as leaders in a community, particularly those of you who are in the community board, and of course our elected officials and other faith leaders and other leaders, to work together to be able to do as much as they possibly can. So again, educating youth is extremely important. We have had a youth program that my agency has run since 9/11 called Youth Bridge. And we are now in the process of speaking to people to create Youth Bridge is a citywide program. It trains high school students, 11th and 12th graders in core skills to be able to solve problems together and see the other in society as an asset rather than a problem. We're looking to turn to others to be able to bring in boot camp styles of Youth Bridge around the city for high school kids, but you got to start a lot younger. And those kinds of things need to be instituted both from the community, but certainly from the DOE. And we're working with I know that the councilman is working with the Department of Education on these issues as well. Another thing that we recently instituted as a PATH partner, again, with the mayor's office on hate crimes prevention, we created a fellowship in Brooklyn. Brooklyn has some of the highest rates of hate crimes in the city and hate incidents in the city. And we created a fellowship where we identified 18 true influencers. So that's the new terminology, influencers or leaders in society, people who have influence over large numbers of people. They are going through a 5-month boot camp to learn core skills to be able to fight hate together. They're being given the opportunity to travel to sites where hate has reared its ugly head in Brooklyn. They are being given the opportunity to travel together to Washington, D.C. to visit some sites there where hate has been designated and codified, such as the African Museum of Culture and such as the Holocaust Museum. Our job is to make sure that they have the skills, and we've developed a very sharp curriculum to be able to meet this challenge. However, the most important thing is forming a cadre, a cohort of leaders that know each other and trust each other so that they can effectively work together. They can look at the causes of hate within their own communities and understand it isn't one community's responsibility, it's every community's responsibility to be able to effectively work together. And that's a really important message because often, well, I'll give you an example. In 2019, there was one, according to the NYPD, one hate crime committed against the Asian community. By the way, there was probably more. There's probably more. And one of the biggest problems with hate crimes citywide is that they are wholly underreported. The Jewish community has a long history of reporting hate crimes. Hence, there are more anti-Semitic hate crimes reported than any other hate crime. But ask the NYPD, ask anyone, we know that there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of hate crimes being committed against other communities that are simply not coming forward and reporting them to the police. We have to be able to get people to be able to do that. And that's one of the jobs of these PATH partners, is to be able to work with their communities. So there's a PATH partner in the Muslim community, in the Black community, in the LGBTQI community, in the Asian community. And they are working with their partners as well in the communities to get more people to report these crimes. Whether they rise to the level of hate crimes or they don't, it means that more resources will be geared towards these kinds of acts in the community, and we'll have the data. I'll give you one last example. And this is something that was extremely powerful. Right after 9/11, a good friend of mine, well, actually one of my best friends in the world, his name is Mohammed Razvi. He's a leader in the South Asian community in Brooklyn, did an informal study with the New York City Human Rights Commission of the amount of hate incidents that happened against the Muslim community following 9/11. There were over 1,100 incidents in a 6-month period of time documented. According to this study that he did, there was less than a handful of actual reported hate crimes against the Muslim community to the NYPD. So what was our response? Our response was to, in cooperation with the NYPD, with community-based organizations that had trust of the community and experts in the field of hate, to go into these communities and do community trainings on what constitutes a hate crime, how do you report a hate crime, and why should you report a hate crime. Now, if the police had done it on their own, some people might have looked the other way. If the experts had done it on their own, some of the people might have looked the other way. And if some of the trusted community leaders had done it on their own, more would have listened, but they wouldn't have had the raw data and facts. It's only by working together and taking every aspect of society to meet this horrific challenge that is going on right now, are we going to be able to really do the kinds of changes that are necessary. So again, unity is an important thing. It's not a kumbaya. This is not a kumbaya moment. This is real hard work. This is making some very hard decisions about the utilization of resources to do trainings and teachings in the community. This is making sure that leaders are dedicated to this. And I'm going to leave one last piece, and this has been really essential. It's making sure we have the resources in a community that's having real problems to bring on professionals, have someone wake up in the morning and say, this is my problem to deal with. Because all of us want to deal with it and we all get sidetracked. When we have formed a coalition, when we have formed a fellowship, when we have formed activities in a community, by getting someone to really do the organizing in a community and seeing it as their job, we have been successful. So I'll end it with this. Remember, I said I started close to 30 years ago after the riots in Crown Heights. And last summer, I'm going to use this word, celebrated the 30th anniversary of those riots. So you might say, how do you celebrate a riot? We celebrated because there's still racism in the community. There's still anti-Semitism in that community. There's still poverty in that community. There's still problems in that community. As a matter of fact, they got more problems now because Crown Heights is one of the fastest gentrifying communities in New York City. However, all those tensions have not, risen or boiled over into a riot in 30 years. We celebrated the victory of people learning how to work together and meet the challenges of a conflictual society that is consistently in change. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you. Let's have Sylvia and then Bob Bender.
I just wanted to share with the committee, a number of the speakers have spoken about education. I'm the chair of the Education, Libraries, and Cultural Affairs Committee of Community Board 8. And a couple of months ago, one of my members of the committee spoke to me about a program that Manhattan College had on the Holocaust. They have a very large department that deals with that. And after seeing the video that this gentleman, Roger Grunwald, has done, he's a Bronx person, but now lives in California. He has done a one-act kind of thing on the Holocaust because his mother and aunt were in concentration camps during the World War II, and they survived. And he made a promise to his mother that he would never give up teaching other people about the Holocaust and the horror of the whole thing. I saw the video, and a few months ago, the committee started to speak about having him here. Last year, he was at, just to mention a school that you can identify with, is Bronx, Brooklyn Tech. He has been, as I say, all over the country. He usually charges, he's doing it for nothing. I've spoken to 368, which is down the hill, the high school. And also today I spoke to the principal of RKA, which is part of 141. And both principals are very anxious to see the video, which we have sent them, and to have this presented in their social studies high school classes. There is a state curriculum of World War II, and they do also cover the Holocaust. But it was my feeling that if you have a live person talking about it, it is more identifiable than just a one page or 1 week of speaking about it in a classroom. The program really also involves what is going on in the world today, like a while ago with George Floyd. That was part of it. The children are of many different backgrounds, but they many of them have experienced racism, and they can identify with this. I've read some reports, and it seems to be very good that the students really get it, and they might not feel like that once, before they see this situation, this act, but afterwards they do identify with it. So I'm very happy that now that unfortunately the situation has gotten worse in our community, but this is in the works and it is going to happen. And I just want to share that the education is going to be done. I'm not saying this is the end all. There are many other things that need to be done also, but it's a small contribution that we can make.
So thank you, Sylvia. If I can just respond,
Sure.
I sit on the board of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Interfaith Studies Department in Manhattan College, headed by Manaz Afridi, who's a remarkable educator. And you're right, you guys are extremely lucky that you have that particular resource right in your community, higher education resource that has done incredible studies. But remember, the name says Holocaust, Genocide, and Interfaith. We have to be responsive. Now, my wife is a second-generation Holocaust survivor. We are all very extremely responsive to the messages of the Holocaust. But I think, Sylvia, you said it yourself. If we don't insert the issues and the trauma that many of the people have undergone because of racism and the other issues of hate, which is now percolating through our society, students will understand one piece of it, but hate is a complex issue. We can find the commonality between hate. We need to be able to speak to people about how hate affects them, and then to create the linkage between the effect upon them and the effect upon the other, and lend dignity to each and every, and have them understand that every person in the world deserves, it's a God-given right to have the same level of dignity given to them. So thank you.
I would like to second that, because I believe there should be that intersectionality. I'm Bernadette Anand. I have been an educator for over 50 years. I've been trained in Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, the National SEED organization, and led community groups around diversity and conversations across all different groups of people, and have done that also within schools. I do think that that is a most important piece right now, that we can talk to each other about the kinds of divisions that occur between and among all the different groups. And unless we do that, and we take that perspective and we have that kind of range of people and perspectives, we're not really going to get at the core issues that divide, because if it isn't one group, another group is going to come and be targeted. And it depends on what's going to happen. I do think education, yes. Perhaps maybe we should get to teachers. There's a kind of workshop, a week-long workshop that teachers can attend from schools, where they send 2 teachers from a school to the National Seed Seminar. They get trained in how to lead their own groups when they go back to the schools and get more teachers involved, because the more that it happens that way, because conversations in classrooms start to divide, things in halls start to divide. Just looks across each, from one group to another get to be the kind of targets. So perhaps that is one. Also, I know
Let's
from
take
Montclair
I-87
that
South, Major Deegan Expressway Bronx, and Grand Central Parkway East.
what was
About that,
Go ahead.
What was that? I'm sorry, what was that? What was that? I'm not sure what.
It was someone else's. Keep
Oh, all
continue
right.
what you were saying.
There's also in Montclair, they did an Undoing Racism workshop with people in the community, and that grew, and there were a number of those that addressed racial incidents within the high school and also within the community. A community that had very strong populations of Jewish and Black. And in order to create the kinds of relationships that should exist, they did these Undoing Racism workshops.
Right.
So those are 2, but I really like your,
So unfortunately, that was me who, I have another commitment out, and believe it or not, out in Queens. And I was just doing, I thought I was on mute, and I had to do a Waze to see how long it would take me to get there. So I have time, literally have time for one more question. But Bernadette, you're absolutely right. The notion of undoing racism is complex. People need to learn the impact of racism in the context of society. There is not an aspect of our society that is not touched by racism, and we need to understand that. And we need to be conscious that everyone is undergoing some sort of trauma within the context of a toxic polarity in our society right now. And that's one of the reasons that hate is rising to the top. But I think Bob Bender had the question, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to get going in just a few minutes. But I can be back. I can be back.
Bob, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. Education seems to be the theme right now in this conversation. I don't know the answer to this question. Perhaps you do. Is there a mandate in the public schools to discuss issues like this? Is it required in middle school or high school for teachers to, or for the schools themselves to have some sort of conversation about race, ethnicity, discrimination, whether it's because of ethnicity, race, gender, whatever? Because this seems to me to be the closest thing to an answer to this problem based on what you've said tonight. And thanks again for coming.
So it's interesting. I had a discussion with the incoming chancellor, now the chancellor, before when he was incoming chancellor. And again, I was on his transition team. This is going to be a priority of his new administration in the DOE to make sure that these kinds of curricula are honed and really brought into various different levels of the school systems. And again, it's going to take a little while for that to happen. Fortunately and unfortunately, for the past number of years, there's not been a real deep focus on this particular issue. It has happened. There's been some trainings and teachings in the school, but they've been sporadic. To go back to something that I think I heard Bernadette refer to, and certainly Sylvia as well, is that this needs to be and you, Bob, this needs to be a priority. The work of undoing, of meeting the challenge of hate, of getting people to know each other and to understand each other, and to have the kinds of levels of respect and dignity for the other needs to be integrated fully into every aspect of education. It can't be seen as a side thing. And unfortunately, all too often, this kind of work is seen as, well, when something happens, we get all upset and we do it. And then when things calm down, it no longer is a priority. And I'm really, really hoping that society and particularly those who are making these decisions see this as a priority and a fully integrated piece. But I know Eric Dinowitz just got out of the school system, and I see his hand up. So if I can turn to Eric for 1 minute, and then I really have to run, I'm sorry.
Yes, Bob, that what you brought up is a good point. What's in the schools, and I also had the opportunity to speak with the chancellor, so I'll share with him what I shared with you. I'll share with you what I shared with him, which is my experience in the school. And throughout 14 years, we've had all sorts of initiatives and programs. And on the one hand, you have teachers who really want to lean into this, really want to lean into things like social emotional learning, which was a big push, mental health. We know it's important. The problem is what is the product that the school system is asking for? And typically the product that they're asking for is a test score. So while we have teachers, and I'm, by the way, one of these teachers who would try very hard and would do it, integrate things like, and I'm using mental health as an example because that was started to be implemented under the de Blasio administration. The other question would come up, which is about the test scores, because at the end of the day, there were the teachers and the schools are judged very much on the test scores. It was the same with the way they wanted us to teach. They wanted us to teach, when I taught math, it was, exploring and, exploring the numbers and everything, all sorts of stuff, which I loved to do. But at the same time, unfortunately, we have this mandate that we have to produce a product, and that product is a kid with a high test score. So teachers are also in this really difficult spot of spending time and energy ensuring that the students know how to pass a test, which I would add is poorly written. So I shared this with the chancellor, and that's some of the work that I want to be pushing to, which is to say, if you're not testing on it, or you're not asking the teachers for a product, or the school is not incentivized to have the students do this by rating them higher. Your schools get quality reviews, schools get reviews by their superintendent. Teachers are very much reviewed on their test scores and on their observations. So if you're not attaching numbers to this, or if you're telling teachers, don't worry about those numbers, we want to see holistically what you're doing with the kids, I think that's an important way forward. And it is all of these conversations are difficult because of the sensitivity of it, but because there are so many layers and layers of bureaucracy and the way we've been doing things that we have to undo a lot of things first, both in the bureaucratic sense and in the difficult conversation sense of things like race and religion.
So I couldn't agree with you more that the test scores, and I always have to be careful what I say sometimes, but I'm glad you said it. Test scores became sort of the CompStat of education. It was the way we qualified so much and quantified it so much. I want to give one last example, and just to lift up what the council member said. For many, many years in some of the coalition work that we did in New York, and that's one of the ways that we got people to learn how to work with each other, did a lot of work around healthcare. And healthcare, we focused on the issue of cultural competency. Cultural competency was always considered an unfunded mandate. In other words, it was nice, it was important, but it wasn't as prioritized. Well, when Health and Human Services and then New York State DOH codified cultural competency in healthcare as one of the deliverables that was built into them being certified through the Joint Commission. In other words, they had to do it, or they wouldn't get their licensing, and they had to build it into the system, or they wouldn't get their licensing. Guess what the hospitals began to do? They began to develop cultural competency departments and began to effectively integrate it into the full delivery of healthcare, to the point where we no longer had to advocate for it because they were doing it because it was now a mandate. This must be mandated. And hopefully that's the answer to the question. It seems that exactly what the council member said to the chancellor. And I know the chancellor for many, many years. I'm sure that he took it well, council member. He understood it. And as you said, it's going to take a little while to undo the culture, but we will get there. We will get there only if we work together. And we're vociferous. And to quote one of my main teachers in the world, Congress member Greg Meeks, we got to be consistent and persistent in this work. And only by doing that are we going to get to the other side. So thank you all very much. And I got to run out the Queens because I'm going to have a whole other group of people not being very happy with me. Okay.
Thank you so much. Safe travels. We really
And
appreciate it.
I'll come back. Don't worry about it. You just
Okay,
asked
good.
me and I'll come back. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye
Okay,
now.
will do. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, everyone. We
Can
really-
can I make it before, can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead.
No,
can hear you.
He signed off.
Oh, he signed up. I can. I was wondering if we could do something very quickly. Perhaps we could have a call out to the schools, to the students, maybe in the high school first and the middle schools, of those who would like to come together for either an after school or a Saturday morning or a Saturday afternoon, where we would just have a discussion about how we create a better community and say to them, we've had these racial incidents in the community that they have been rearing their heads, and we would like to have you come together to discuss and to see how we can, as a group of people, do something about this. And I've seen this happen in a number of schools where you can just, if a lot of kids come, you can set them up into groups and you can group them and reporting back. I think it would be a wonderful start because there are kids who know about this, who want to be leaders, who want to come forth. And if we give them the space and the opportunity to do so, soon, we can then decide from those reports back from the groups, we can then see what kind of an action plan we can move ahead with.
Okay.
But if we think it's education, let's go back to the kids and say to them, come together. We're having a meeting. It's a community meeting to deal with the racial incidents that have been occurring. And if you are interested in working together on this, we invite you to come, and we have some food for them. That always attracts.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Julia Gomez, who is the chair of the youth department, isn't here tonight. I'll certainly follow up with her, but all of her youth meetings are working with schools and community organizations. And certainly Sylvia Alexander, who's the head of the education committee, is here tonight. So perhaps Sylvia and Julia can follow up on your recommendation. I want to get to Steph and then Matt, and then I do want to move on to our next topic.
I was
And then
just going to
Jackie.
say,
Go ahead.
yeah, I know of another city-funded opportunity. They're giving out micro grants to 501c3s to do this type of work, to work with communities and have conversations. If you're familiar with NYC Speaks, I think it's nycspeaks.org. I think you do have to be a 501c3, and there are grants up to $20,000, but it's a tiered structure. So if you have a 501c3 status in your neighborhood, you can sign up to get funding to help run community conversations like that.
Great, thank you.
Nice.
Matt?
Hi, I just want to introduce myself and share a little bit. I'm Matt Abrams-Gerber. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Riverdale Y. Also happen to be a neighbor of Bob's. And so it's nice to be here tonight, and I appreciate this conversation. And it's one that we at the Y have been having for a while and have been are working closely with Councilmember Dinowitz and his office and with Bob Kaplan. And I will say that in some of the conversations we've had, Bernadette, to your note or your comment, there is actually stuff being done at RKA, student-led work around anti-hate stuff. And one of the things that we're going to be fleshing out next week with them is, how do they take the lead on some of it? Because the teens are incredibly creative. And when it comes from them, they can go even further. So it's exciting to know that there's some stuff, there's action happening, and we are excited to be one of the partners to support some of those efforts and efforts of others around the community to try to continue to put out an anti-hate message and approach, and really try to build and strengthen our community. So just wanted to let you know that they're doing some of that stuff, and we're involved in that stuff too, and look forward to working with this committee to continue to strengthen our wonderful Riverdale community. So thank you for all that you are all doing.
Thank you. Jackie? Jackie, are you able to?
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll be brief here. There's just 2 points I'd like to make. This is a fabulous idea. I think we should make it a point, I don't know, we should include not only public schools, but all of the schools in Riverdale, whether it's the Hill Schools, SAR, whoever. Because I don't think it's a conversation just for public schools. And secondly, I guess, Matt, since you seem to be doing it,
Yes.
is there a professional lead? I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Is this being led by a professional, that has professional development in this?
Is at RKA or in the community?
Well, in the community, if we do it or it's done, or currently, because it is a sensitive, subject, and there is some professional development, for a teacher or whoever does it, to lead a group of students within a conversation.
Well, the work, I don't want to speak for the school. I just want to let people know that they're doing it. There are teachers, there are teachers who are working like in different clubs and groups at the school.
Right.
So they're, it's all in concert with the teachers.
Okay.
And I think ideally what you're talking about in terms of involving, other schools as well, I think I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think that, ultimately that would be a goal of trying to get,
in the past,
schools, everybody. Yeah.
In the past, I've been part of a group that connected Riverdale Country and Intech, and they were very successful in jointly. I mean, the public school system has their rules, who can travel with who and where and blah, blah, blah. But in connecting them with the UN, and they jointly did this. So it's important to have those voices as well, Horace Mann and the rest.
Great. All right, thank you so much. I just wanted to get to the next topic, which is several proposals that are going to be on the ballot in November 2022. These are proposals led by New York City's Racial Justice Commission. These were formulated with guidance from public engagement. And really the 3 proposals focus on the following core actions. One is a government statement of values to articulate sort of the intent within all that government does and provides. The second is racial equity, creating an office plan and a commission. And then the third is creating an effort to measure the true cost of living in New York City. And I know that we have some community members rather, who were interested in talking about this a little bit. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to elaborate on them a little bit more. I can also share the ballot questions and the website where they are, where the information is held. I will show very quickly. This is Racial Justice Commission. Thank you to Rosemary who put this on our radar. And again, here are the 3 ballot questions. So it would be an amendment to the New York City Charter. You can read here the amendment. Steph, go ahead. I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, so this is the press release. If you go to nyc.gov/racial justice, it's the commission's website. So hi, everyone. I am Steph Halpin. I'm going to be really speaking as a member of this community. I was born in Norwood. I grew up in Woodlawn, and now I live in South Riverdale. So born and raised in the neighborhood, and in my day job, I work for the Racial Justice Commission. So I'm pretty familiar with these proposals. But tonight I'm just going to be talking to you as in my personal capacity. So there are 3 proposals. They are intended to foundationally change the city charter. And the purpose of them is to begin dismantling structural racism. So there is a statement of values to guide government. That's the first proposal. And essentially what that is adding a preamble, the current New York City Charter. And if you're unfamiliar with what the charter is, I know I was actually, when I first started with the commission, I wasn't fully aware of the power and the authority that it has over everything that we do in the city. But the commission is simultaneously a charter revision commission. So these proposals will be on the ballot November 8th at the general election. They'll be on the back. So you'll flip them over. I'm going to tell you my personal capacity. I will be voting yes to all 3 of them. And I encourage all of you to learn more about them and, use your voice and make your voice heard. But these are all intended to, again, begin the process of dismantling structural racism in the charter. So this second proposal is one of the biggest things, I think, throughout the process, the public engagement process that the commission went through. Many people had tons of different ideas on what needed to be addressed, and many of them were extremely urgent and important, but they were almost like stopgaps, or like putting a Band-Aid on a giant gash and wound. So what each of these proposals are, intended to do is to get to the root cause of the problem. So this one here, this Racial Equity Office Plan and Commission, this is like a really powerful way to hold government accountable to racial equity. So you can see, this is the question. It's long. We tried to make it as short as possible. The abstract text is below it. It gives you a little bit more details. And then if you're totally into law and you like this kind of stuff, you can actually read the legal amendments that will be made to the city charter as well. But this one specifically, it'll essentially create a framework to get at the root of racial disparities. And what's great about this one is it applies to all agencies. So every agency will need to make a racial equity plan that aligns with the timing of the city's budget process. And that plan will then, each agency's plan needs to be reviewed by an independent commission. The commission is meant to be made up of New Yorkers who have experience with racial injustice and have lived experiences. The commission is also meant to be a mix of mayoral appointments, council appointments, and also requirement to have young people on the commission. So this is a really unique style of holding government accountable and having a degree of community input and oversight. And then the Racial Equity Office would work to coordinate all of this and support city agencies in building out their racial equity plans and meeting their goals. There's other really interesting elements that you might not glean from the actual question, but you'll get in the abstract text, which is making sure that the government infrastructure that is or the plans, and racial equity involves building government infrastructure that prioritizes ease of use, language justice, and accessibility, both physical accessibility and other accessibility requirements. So this one is one of my favorites. The first proposal is also really great too. It has a preamble. If you look at the actual text of the preamble, you'll see recognition of past harms. You'll see recognition of indigenous groups. And you'll also see a statement of values and how the city should support and set standards for how people should thrive. Rather than just survive here in the city, how should people thrive? What should we work to do that? And this question, measure the true cost of living, is also extremely valuable to advocates. So right now, the city uses the federal poverty guideline, as well as the NYC Gov poverty guideline. And what it doesn't, first thing is those factor in public benefits. And so this would actually have the city measure the true cost of living, including public benefits or other assistance. In addition to that, it would prioritize dignity over poverty. So if the city were to measure the true cost of living, it would aim to have an accurate depiction of what it takes to meet your essential needs and live with dignity in the city. So it's and then therefore guide other programmatic and policy decisions made by city government. So it's a really powerful one as well. All that is to say, getting the word out about these is going to be a huge lift. As the commission, the Racial Justice Commission, due to legal issues, we can only educate, we can't advocate. So the commission is undertaking a huge education campaign. We're attempting to roll things out in the next few months. But again, like in personal capacity, I'm looking to begin a Yes campaign around here just to get people aware of the proposals. And then to bring things top of mind again, in 2021, there were statewide ballot proposals that flopped statewide. Here in the city, they did well, but we saw a huge decrease in voter turnout. And there were also initiatives and lobbying against the proposals. So just looking at the most recent, elections and the efforts that were taken to stifle those proposals from passing, and ultimately were successful in doing so. I personally am concerned about that. And so I'm hoping to, again, work with different community groups and, in my personal capacity, be available to, share information, work through details and things like that. So I'll kind of pause there. There's tons of information online, and there will be more just basic education information to come as well. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Steph. Do we have any questions? Okay, great. Thank you so much for that information. Let's see, I think we're going to next move on to old business. And I just wanted to touch base with some of the special committee on racial equity committee members. We do have some action items or recommendations that we had to do a little bit of homework while between today and our previous meeting. So I just wanted to check in with some of you all, with Ramda, with Bob, with Julie, and I think those are the only committee members here tonight. and see if you had any edits on the recommendations, if you had any other, oh, Camelia is here. Great, then we can vote on the minutes. So perfect timing, Camelia. We're just talking about old business, which is the upcoming report. Last we spoke, there were a couple of recommendations that came out of the initial SPRE report in January of 2021. And last meeting, we did sort of just like a check-in on some of them to see if they're still relevant. Some of them we put on hold that we talked about last meeting. Some are in progress, and then some are unknown. So I just wanted to check in with SPRE committee members and see if you all had any edits, suggestions, changes, anything off the top of your head. But other than that, I will update you on a couple of things I know.
Margaret, the only item I have is, you and I exchanged emails about this, is the community organizations. The community board maintains a list of community organizations, and it's terribly out of date and incomplete. And so I've begun a dialogue with the community board office to see if we can update it. You know, that's going to be an ongoing conversation. And I'm sure, you know, while I can think of a number of organizations that are not listed and should be, I'm sure that others on the committee and on the board will be aware of still other organizations that I don't know about that should be included as well. So I think we should open up that discussion. Perhaps now that I think about it, I'm sorry I didn't think about it yesterday, the executive committee might be a good place to bring this issue up and ask everybody to, you know, review that list and see if we can update it.
Okay.
So as I say, I've started on it, but you know, this will be ongoing.
Okay, that's a good next step. I think there are two things that are sort of on hold. One is that we did modify the language on one of the recommendations, provide resources on topics to advance racial equity of discussion on standing committees. That's one thing that we changed last time. Each SPRE member to formally attend at least one meeting of a standing committee. That's in progress. Everyone, the only committee we do not have representation on now is health and hospitals. So I don't know if anyone stands to have the capacity to go to another meeting. Their agenda is always amazing. Omar does an incredible job. So I think it would be an enjoyable meeting to go to, but nonetheless, it's a time commitment. So that is something that I just wanted to put on folks' radars. But that's sort of a gap for us right now. Just because the order that I see you in, Ramdat and then Camelia.
I'll defer to Camelia because my point is on another topic of all business.
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Ramdat, and big apologies to the entire committee. I was only able to join due to a work event. I was just being able to join now, but as you all know me by now, this is really the agenda point that is burning me the most. I think how to say, I'm fully supporting Bob's suggestion in terms of additions, but I also think we should definitely pursue our conversation from last meeting, which was referring to the report as something that has a fixed component part and sort of a component that will sort of change from year to year. And specifically this year, I think we have a lot of substantive material that will be both sort of on the positive side, but also in areas of concern. And I do think this deserves sort of a wider conversation, because I would love to, again, the report that we have now on the website is the report from October of 2020, I believe. And this is no longer, how to say, I don't know, it's time to have a version 2. And as much as we can push it in the context of this year, let's please gather and do our best to do something. No, nothing will ever be perfect, but some updates, substantive updates are necessary. And I would love to, yeah, just one more point, if I may. This is a Community Board 8 specific report. So just one other section that I would like to be added in terms of, it's very quantitatively, it's not that much quantitative. Even our statistic, the actual racial composition, the demographic composition, it's in an annex somewhere. But I would also like to put there the Community Board 8 membership's own demographics based on the formal reports that the Bronx Borough President issues that year. I think that's also informative as a way to show sort of the ability of Community Board 8 to align with representing the community. Of course, the numbers will be slightly different, but I think that is relevant to have there, both in terms in demographics, but also, again, as we follow this from year to year, that report is a reliable government source that should also be translated and be included as quantitative data in our report. So just wanted to kind of bring this up for further follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. In terms of the report, we did mention that the interim report, we'd like to have it to present to the board in May 2022. Camelia, are you volunteering your time to draft the interim report?
I mean, maybe not entirely, but definitely to be part of the team. And I mean, I feel strongly about this, so I would definitely, I will happily co-edit with whomever, with you, Margaret, under your leadership, and whomever else you might like to assign as a quick task force on the reports within the committee. I'm happy to help, yes.
Okay. I did ask Julie Reyes to also be a part of this. I'm not sure that I'm gonna have the capacity to do this between now and May, but I would love to support it and just get it done. So this is in progress. There is a training on diversity, equity, and inclusion that I believe the borough president will be requiring or recommending that Laura mentioned at exec the other day. So that is something that we do know about. It's a little bit different than one of our recommendations to have training and ongoing discussion with board members and staff on unconscious bias and structural racism. But nonetheless, I think we're moving in that direction very slowly. Support increased diversity on CB8 through the borough president, public events, and community where they are. I did want to flag, I don't know if others have received the application to apply for the community board. I was a little concerned that I didn't see it shared over Twitter, where there does seem to be like a strong community activity. I think I've seen it once through the email. I do see it regularly posted and reposted by the borough president. But from the office, I haven't seen it. So I was just going to follow up on that. I mean, it's sort of a moot point. It's due tomorrow. But I did ask for the office to follow up. So I will do that again. Let's see. So I think that concludes our recommendations, edits, suggestions, comments. Ramdat, did you have something that you want to speak to regarding recommendations or something else entirely?
Hey, Margaret, thank you so much. This is regarding the census work that we were going to work on. So we decided to put it on hold because the city is rolling out its own equitable development data tool. And there is a training on Saturday, which the board office did forward around that email to us. There was a training on Tuesday, Thursday with today, and the last one's on Saturday at 10 a.m. I can reshare it with this group, the link to sign up if you didn't get it. So we're interested to see what this tool will do for our board. And I think it may encompass a lot of information that we were looking to do. with the census tract anyway. So instead of, having us do a lot of the grunt work, we'll see what the city rolls out with this equitable development data tool. That is all,
Thank you so
Margaret.
much. Thank you. Okay. I'm just going through my list here, making sure I got everything. Great. So the last thing that I want to touch on and just confirm, I'm not sure if this is old business or new business or sort of has a foot in both camps, but budget requests. I know at the housing committee, at the aging committees, we did specifically talk about budget requests that are that have an intent on advancing racial equity. I just wanted to check in with others. Bob Fanuzzi just sent me a couple of bullet points. If that's something that I think everyone reading the environment and sanitation minutes knows how I guess aggressive ENS is on taking on some of these issues that are focused on equity and making sure that there is environmental justice in our neighborhoods. So they have their foot on the accelerator. Any other committees that you all want to report on just from any sort of budget asks just to share? Go ahead, Ramdat.
On behalf of Parks, we know that Bailey Playground was not funded, and we are looking forward to putting that again on the budget request. And then we did invite all of the parks groups to come and share what their parks need. So we had every park group within CB8, which was great. We got to know a lot of issues that are happening in their park. I've been on a lot of email chains with, the parks groups and Joe Magnieri, and a lot of the simple issues have been getting fixed, which is a great thing. In terms of education, and I know Sylvia's here as well, we are looking at the Mitzvah project, which is looking at how the Holocaust is taught in schools. And I don't know if I left anything else out, Sylvia. So feel free to chime in.
No, that's what we're working on mainly right now.
Great, thank you. Jackie, can I put you on the spot? I know you're very involved in Marble Hill and the community garden there. We do, as a part of the housing committee and a part of the racial equity committee, we're always talking about ways that we can be strengthening some of our buildings in the area, and particularly some of the public housing. Anything that any recommendations or any requests that you all have for capital projects, those big ones above, what is it, 50,000 or 35,000? I think last year we proposed a boiler for one of the buildings, the sidewalks, having the sidewalks near you gutted and replaced because there's so many tripping hazards. Anything else that you would recommend, Jackie?
I would defer to Tony. What's Tony's last name?
Yeah, I know Tony. Okay.
And
yeah,
I
been part of the conversation.
Tony Edwards.
Edwards, yeah. But I would also, because I know they're doing some work within the community center. I don't know if it was Adonis or someone that allotted that money, but I will think of it and get back to you,
Okay, sounds
but I
good.
will speak with some of the gardeners because they have a better understanding of what's needed. I know they're working on heating and stuff. It hasn't been a pleasant time this winter.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, we just finished meetings down there the last Saturday and Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Dan, did you want to mention anything about aging, or anyone else want to chime in on anything else related to budget asks? To Dan shortly.
Hey, Margaret, not at this time, though I will discuss with the committee next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Margaret.
Thank you. All right, great. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for tonight. I think it does all of our hearts good to be able to talk and come together as a community. So thank you for everyone's input. Certainly, we still have a lot of work to do, but thank you all for being here tonight. Is there anything else that we've missed? Anything else we haven't covered in new business, or things that I have forgotten to mention?
Margaret, the minutes?
Minutes.
Approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Bob. Holy smokes. I would have been so upset. All right, so can I have a motion to approve the February 22 minutes?
Motion to
Motion.
approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. Okay, anything else? I bid you all adieu. Be safe. Take care of each other. Have a good night.
Motion to
Bye-bye.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
All right,
meeting,
take
Margaret.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Good night,
Margaret.
y'all.
Thanks.
Good night,
night.
everybody. Take care.